Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everybody. I'm Mr. Khairi, a biology teacher. In this session, we'll be learning about animals. Animals belong to kingdom Animalia. Kingdom Animalia, which do belong actually to a higher level or a higher taxon called a domain. And this domain is called Eukarya. And eukarya actually are called commonly eukaryotes. And these are the organisms with membrane-bound nuclei, like nucleus, with nucleus. Organisms with nucleus belong to domain eukarya. Four kingdoms are there. One of them is Animalia, or which are known by animals. Kingdom Animalia, or what commonly called by animals, includes actually two groups. First group called Invertebrates, and second group called Vertebrates. Invertebrates represent the majority. The majority of animals are invertebrates, and invertebrates are those animals without backbones. While the animals that are called vertebrates are those animals with backbone or vertebral column. Okay, let's focus on today's session on invertebrates, animals without backbones. And this group includes actually about 10 groups or phyla. Phyla, the plural of phylum. Phylum is the lower level after kingdom. A kingdom is actually a group of related phyla. What are these phyla and how are they different? Let's get started. All clear? And now let's move to these groups. Here we go. These groups are, the first is called Porifera and includes members of sponges. Second group called Cnidarians is silent and includes many members like jellyfishes, hydra, corals, and sea anemones, corals. Third group includes flatworms, and flatworm includes three members, planarians, tapeworms, and fluke, or what's commonly called by bilharzia. Also called schistosoma or schistosoma. Nematodes, or what's commonly called by roundworms, and includes all parasitic worms like hookworms, scarred worms, filarial worms, pinworms, and trichonella worms. Group number 5, the relatives of nematodes, are called rotifers. Group number 6, called mollusks, starts with K or with C, like snails, slugs, clams, squids, and octopus. The 7th group is called annelids, the segmented worms like earthworms, leeches, and also the marine annelids. Marine annelids, like fanworms, The 8th group, called arthrobots. And you know what? The majority of invertebrates are the arthrobots. They represent the majority. They're the most diverse group. Arthrobots, which includes 3 groups: crustaceans, like shrimps, crabs, crayfish, lobsters; arachnids, like spiders and scorpions; insects like butterflies and all flies, mosquitoes as well. The 9th group is called echinoderms, like sea urchins, sea stars, sea cucumbers, and cellules, and many, many more. The 10th group is actually called the invertebrate chordates. Invertebrates. Unlike the previous ones, in this group are chordates. See, What makes this group unique is their being chordates. Chordate means having 4 features, and these features are listed below. And they are from now, they are notochord, the notochord, the dorsal tubular nerve cord, also something called pharyngeal pouch, also the postanal tail. Any invertebrate or any other organism with these 4 features called chordate. So again, unlike the previous groups from 1 to 9, they are invertebrates only and non-chordates. They're invertebrates and non-chordates. While the 10th group is unique of being chordates. Chordate means having these 4 features, like lancelets and tunicates. All of these 10 groups details are mentioned below. So let's go over each group and their features. Are clear now? So we can go to the next point. First point of their features or their characteristics is how they reproduce. Here we go. The way they reproduce in general, the methods of reproduction we know are sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. They reproduce sexually. Sexual reproduction, of course, requires 2 parents and produce different offspring. Sexual is better than asexual in producing or increasing diversity. Asexual reproduction requires 1 parent, only 1 parent. But the disadvantage of the asexual reproduction is that it produces identical offspring. Actually, it doesn't lead to any diversity. Asexual reproduction are actually in 1, 2, 3, 4 groups. 4 types. The 4 different methods of asexual reproduction the animals perform are budding, regeneration, fragmentation, and parthenogenesis. Now, how are these 4 methods different? Budding, offspring developed from cells from an outgrowth or a bud on the parent. Example in sponges. Here is a sponge. You might have seen a sponge before. If you've seen a sponge, you see it you see it in groups. Each is a sponge. How each a sponge form? Many ways. One of these ways is budding. I think if we relate this to plant, it will be obvious. Potato, for example, I think many of you have seen a bud or outgrowth from a bud, just like cactus, also in plants. You've seen this shape before. What each is called, each is actually called a bud. All are buds. They're different, they're plants, they're not only one. Similarly, animals can reproduce the same way, budding, as in cnidarians like Hydra, which is similar to sponges, and also sponges. These 2 invertebrates can reproduce by an asexual method called budding. Regeneration. What's a regeneration? Regeneration, like that, what happens in geckos. I think all of you have seen geckos before. A gecko, when we try to throw it the shoes, it leaves its tail. It leaves its tail behind and escapes. You know what? It leaves it. We don't cut it by the shoes. No, it leave it. So distract us while it escapes. By time, you know what? This missed body part of the geckos can be regenerated. And you know what's amazing is that the tail also can regenerate the whole body part again if it has enough genetic information and enough energy. Wow, what a way. First time, I think, maybe you know. This is regeneration. From a lost body part, the rest of the body grows. They call this regeneration. Fragmentation is actually similar to regeneration because every fragmentation is followed by regeneration. It happens, as for example, also in the sponge. When the parent plant cuts itself into pieces on purpose or not. And this results in what? This fragmentation. This results in developing new parts, developing a new sponge. Imagine this is a sponge. This is the sponge, and it's cut actually into pieces. See, each piece will develop a new sponge. This also will develop a new sponge. We call this fragmentation, and every fragmentation followed by a regeneration. Fragmentation happens from pieces of the parent, but regeneration happens from the body itself when a couple of cells undergo division and develop a new one. See, they're similar, the fragmentation and regeneration in a way. What's interesting actually is that we learned before, so we come to what parthenogenesis means. We learned before that sexual reproduction requires a sperm, and when it combines an egg cell, this results in a fertilized egg cell, or what is called by zygote, which develop later into the embryo. Good, we know this. But what we don't know is sometimes in some species, certain species, when the sperm is not there, the egg cell can undergo division and develop the embryo, identical embryo to the parent, which is female, is going to be female, identical female. Yeah, directly. If sperm is there, fertilizing the egg cell, we call this sexual reproduction, fertilization. But if there is no sperm, when there is no sperm, and the egg cell develop the embryo directly, we call this parthenogenesis, as in snakes and lizards. This is called parthenogenesis. And these are the 4 different methods of asexual reproduction. Now let's move to another characteristic of the invertebrate. There we go. Remember, after I explain you these points, we'll be answering some questions as well. Note, invertebrates either separate sexes or they're hermaphrodites, male or female. They are separate sexes or hermaphrodite, either this or this. We know male or female. Male able to produce male gametes called sperms, while the female able to produce female gametes called the egg cells. But the hermaphrodites are actually 2 in 1. Hermaphrodites like flatworms, like earthworms, like snails and sponges. All of these can produce both sperms and egg cell. One organism able to produce both sperm cells and egg cells. We call it hermaphrodite. Okay, this is in terms of gender. What about the support? The support actually is 3 kinds. One is called endoskeleton, a second called exoskeleton, and a third called hydrostatic skeleton. I think you all know the endoskeleton, what the endoskeleton is. Endoskeleton, as in humans, inside, and the muscles are attached to it outside. It is either made of bones, as in humans, as in the majority of the animals, including humans, or made of cartilage, as in the cartilaginous fishes, sharks. Okay, they're found in vertebrates, the endoskeleton. Only the vertebrates, not only the vertebrate, all the vertebrates, yes, all of the vertebrates, but one group also of the invertebrates having the skeleton, and this group is echinoderms. Echino or echinoderms. Echinoderms. What echinoderms? Like sea urchin. Remember? I think you all have seen this black animal on the seashore with these black spines. Take care of it. Never go in the water, in the seawater, barefoot, because it's so dangerous, the spines it has. This is sea urchin. Sea cucumber, also sea stars, all of these are echinoderms with endoskeleton. So you can say simply again, the only invertebrate within the skeleton is echinoderm. Of course, all vertebrates have endoskeleton. Second kind of support is called exoskeleton. Exo means outer. It's an outer covering, hard outer covering. This hard outer covering made of chitin. You might ask me now, chitin teacher, we talked it before. Yes, chitin also makes the cell wall of fungi. Makes the cell wall of fungi. And today, we learn more about the chitin, not only lining the fungi cell wall, not only in the fungi cell wall, but also makes the exoskeleton of what? Exoskeleton as in the arthropods. See, most invertebrates, only one group makes the majority of invertebrates, called arthropods. Arthropods. See, all arthropods have exoskeleton made of chitin. So the exoskeleton of the majority of invertebrates, which are arthropods, is made of chitin? Yes. So this is the second time we learn about chitin. Chitin, the polysaccharide molecule. Polysaccharide, one of the carbohydrates, chitin. Just like cellulose, starch, glycogen, all of these are polysaccharide or complex carbohydrates. Chitin, again, make the cell wall of fungi and make also the exoskeleton of arthropods, which represent the majority of invertebrates. All clear? What else, teacher? The third kind of support the invertebrates or the animals have is what? Is the hydrostatic skeleton. Maybe you heard about the endoskeleton and about the exoskeleton, but the hydrostatic skeleton is different. Hydro refers here to water. Hydrostatic skeleton means fluid-filled sac. It's a fluid-filled sac. It's a cavity inside some organisms, and to which muscles attached enable the organism to pull against or to contract. You know, in order for muscles to contract, they need something to pull against, to contract against. It's a support. It's the skeleton. Not all skeletons are that shape we know, are that what we imagine, like the one we have. Not even the chitin. Sometimes it's a fluid-filled sac, as in the durians, jellyfishes, as in roundworms, the nematodes, as in mollusks, like jellyfish, the squid and octopus, like in the annelids, the segmented worms. All of these four have skeleton, which is fluid-filled sac. This one, in some invertebrates, it's a fluid-filled sac called hydrostatic skeleton. That was all about the skeletons, the types of skeletons, all the support. What about the symmetry? Yeah, symmetry is a concept you're learning about in math. Symmetry means ability to divide the body into two mirror images, or more than one way, along one plane or along more than one plane into two mirror images. If you can divide the body into two mirror images, as in humans, see, imagine you. And with a knife, you cut yourself into two halves, half A and half B. In the mirror, it's identical. Because it's only one way, can be divided along one plane, we call this bilateral symmetry. We humans have bilateral symmetry. And you know what? All vertebrates have bilateral symmetry because simply they can be divided along only one plane into two mirror images. But if the body can be divided along any plane, as in jellyfishes, as in echinoderms, we call this radial symmetry. But if the body cannot be divided any way, one way or any way, we call it asymmetry. Asymmetry. So again, there is symmetry and there is asymmetry. Symmetry, either bilateral or radial. But asymmetry means the body cannot be divided any way, one way or any way, into two mirror images. And you know what? The only example we have, the only invertebrate, the only known animal that is asymmetrical is the sponges. Sponges. Sponges have no tissues, have just cells. Sponges are sessile. Sessile, you can see, it's stationary, doesn't move. No tissues at all. This is the only asymmetrical animal or the only asymmetrical invertebrate. The bilateral symmetry, those animals with bilateral symmetry like what? Like, you know what? Like all vertebrates. All vertebrates, including humans, fishes, amphibians, reptiles, and birds. These are vertebrates. These vertebrates have bilateral symmetry. And also what? Also flatworms. Also flatworms, the second group, roundworms, and all organisms after Cnidarians, from the third group, all the invertebrates from the third groups have bilateral symmetry. Okay, sponges and Cnidarians are different. Sponges, no symmetry. Cnidarians like jellyfishes and corals have radial symmetry. See, all humans, birds, echinoderms, even the vertebrates have bilateral symmetry. And there is something else. Any organism with bilateral symmetry means can be divided into two mirror images along one plane, have something called civilization. Civilization means what? Civilization, F, PH, not V, not civilization. Civilization means having the sense organs condensed in the head side. Yeah, we humans, for example, have most of the sense organs, almost all sense organs, including the eyes, the tongue, the nose, the ears, the brain, all are condensed in the head side. In addition, during the early embryonic development, before we're born, and during the early embryonic stages, there is a stage called Gastrula. This is the last early embryonic stage that has 3 layers: ectoderm, mesoderm, the middle layer, and endoderm, the innermost layer. While those who undergo or have radial symmetry have no civilization, means the sense organs are not condensed in one area, and they have only 2 layers. The gastrula, the last early embryonic stage, is only 2 layers: ectoderm and the middle and the inner layer, endoderm. These are what? These are early embryonic stages layers. Yeah, the embryo is in layers. These layers called ectoderm, mesoderm, endoderm. Later, maybe the second page, we're learning more about this. So let's clear and move to the next page. Okay, here we go. Now sponges. What about sponges? As told you, they don't have symmetry. They're sessile, means they don't move, or stationary. They're hermaphrodites, means can produce both sperm cells and egg cells. They have insipid tissues called spicules for protection. Yeah, these spicules are spike-like structures, give the sponges support. When they're threatened, they're about to detach. Spicules. See the sponges? Asymmetrical. Example, Cnidarians like jellyfishes have radial symmetry. All birds, all vertebrates have bilateral symmetry. That was all about the symmetry. What about that early embryonic stage, gastrula? See, during the early embryonic stages or early embryonic development stages, after the egg cell is fertilized by the sperm. Here is a sperm fertilizing the egg cell, producing the first stage, which is called zygote. After the zygote is produced 30 hours later, undergo divisions, producing a stage called, which is actually a solid ball of cells called morula. Morula. And later, the morula developed a fluid-filled ball of cells called blastula. Blastula, or what's called by blastocyst. It's a fluid ball of cells. Okay, when this fluid ball of cell turns into another stage, which is the last early embryonic stage called gastrula. This is called the gastrula. This gastrula is a 3 layers in animals or invertebrates with bilateral symmetry, while it's 2 layers in those with radial symmetry. The 3 layers are from outermost to innermost, from outside to inside. Ectoderm. The second is mesoderm, which is the middle layer here. And the innermost layer, endoderm. Okay. And ectoderm develops in the later development stages, develop the nervous system or tissues and the skin. Very important, this part. I'll tell you how it comes in Tahseli. While the endoderm, the third layer, develops only the digestive system and organs. What about the middle layer, mesoderm? Develops the rest of the body systems and organs. Develops circulatory, muscular, respiratory, excretory, all body systems. This part is called the opening of the gastrula or the blastopore. Here how it comes in Tahseli. One of the questions asked, a patient visited a doctor. And the patient actually was suffering a problem in his nervous system. And the doctor actually related this problem to one of the early embryonic development stages. Which you think? If it says nervous system or skin in the question, choose ectoderm. If it says any part of the digestive system, choose endoderm. And anything else, any other body part, choose mesoderm. See, this is the only one. This is the only way it's asked in Tahseli, and it could be changed. Like, for example, giving you the figure and ask you to label, or what label A is, what label 2 is, what label 3 is, or what this is, or the whole shape is what. Remember, there is a Microsoft form link I'll send you, inshallah, this week to practice many more questions. Not only these questions, not only the question in this booklet, but all questions from the past paper and from different sources I modified, I put in the Microsoft form, which all about invertebrates. I sent you before one about the bacteria, viruses, prions, protista, and fungi. That was number 1. There is number 2, and it's all about invertebrates. Later this week, I'll send you to. Let's clear and move to the next part. That was all about the gastrula. Now about the arthrobots. Arthrobots, one of the invertebrates. Arthrobots is divided into 3 groups. First called insects, second called arachnids, and the third called crustaceans in the next page. Insects. How can I tell whether the arthrobots or whether the organism I see is insect or not? Very important point. If this organism has 3 body parts, by the way, all arthrobots are segmented. All are segmented. Only 2 groups of invertebrates are segmented. Annelids, the segmented worms, and arthropods. In addition, arthropods have exoskeleton. All have exoskeleton. In addition, they undergo a process called molting. What's molting? The removal, the shedding of the exoskeleton in order to grow. Molting again is the removal of the exoskeleton in order to grow. What else? Arthropods have jointed legs, or you can say jointed appendages. Jointed appendages like what? Like the walking legs, like the sensory structures like antenna, and many more jointed. So number 1, jointed appendages. Number 2, segmentation. Number 3, exoskeleton make the arthropods unique. First group of arthropods called insects. And how can I know whether this organism, any organism I see, is insect or not? First, if it has 3 body parts, as shown here, this bee insect has 3 body parts. Head, this part is the head. Thorax, the chest part, and abdomen, this part. 3 segments. 3 body parts, the insect is. In addition, it has 6 walking legs. Remember, 6 walking legs or 3 pairs. Reading the question carefully is very important. Whether the question says 3 pairs or say in total 6 legs. See, here are the 6 legs. 1, 2, 3 this side and 3 the other side. 3 pairs of walking legs. In addition, they might have antenna, and only antenna found in the group of in the insects and the crustacean, the third group. Antenna. These are antenna, and it's only 1 pair. It's 2 pairs in the third group, crustaceans, like shrimps and crabs, like bees and flies, insects. So 3 body parts, 6 walking legs, antenna, and if there's wings, also they might have wings. The only group with wings is insects. No wings in arachnids, like spiders and scorpions. No wings in crustaceans, like shrimps, crabs, and lobsters. It's unique only to the insects. In addition, they have compound eyes. Compound eyes. Okay, that was all about the insects. Now what about the arachnids? The second group. Arachnids includes members of spiders, scorpions, and ticks. All of these are arachnids. They have only 2 body parts. Unlike insects, they have 2 body parts. As shown here, the head and the thorax are fused. The head and the thorax are fused, forming cephalo means head, thorax. Cephalothorax is the first body part, and the second is separate, which is the abdomen. Means arachnids like spiders and scorpions and ticks have 2 body parts, cephalothorax and abdomen. Okay. Next, we have 4 pairs of walking legs, 8 in total, not 6 as in insects. They don't have antenna. Only insects and crustaceans, the third group, have antenna. And antenna are sensory organ. For example, the insects use to detect odor, to smell, you can say. To smell, they use the antenna. Yeah, insects produce pheromones. Pheromone is a chemical they use to communicate. They produce as they go to attract the mate, to communicate, and to detect the odor, to know what odor of this is, to detect it. They use sensory organs called antenna, which is only found in insects in 1 pair, but in 2 pairs in the third group of arthrobots, which is crustacean. Now let's move to the third group, crustacean. The third group of arthrobots. So the arthrobots are 3 groups. Here is the third group of arthrobots, crustaceans. Crustaceans like what? Crustaceans like crab, like lobster, like shrimp, like crayfish. All of these are aquatic. They are aquatic. They are marine, actually. Live in the water. Life in the water requires gills to breathe in the dissolved oxygen. How many body parts, teacher, they have? Unlike insects and like arachnids, they have 2 body parts, and they are the head fused with the thorax, make 1 piece, 1 segment, cephalothorax, number 1. And the second, from here, this is the part we eat, the second, which is the abdomen. Yeah, the part of the shrimp you eat is the abdomen. The part you cut, you remove, is actually the cephalothorax, a head and thorax fused. The whole body part are 2 in the crustaceans, like arachnids, spiders, and scorpions. How many walking legs do they have? Unlike insects, which have 3 pairs, and arachnids, which have 4 pairs, crustaceans have 10 walking legs, or you can say it 5 pairs. 5 pairs of walking legs they have. And because they live in water, they need something to swim with, which is called swimmerets. Swimmerets are small appendages which are found here. Swimmerets. These are swimmerets, and a swimmerets is used for 2 purposes. Of course, the first is swimming, and the second is to carry the fertilized eggs. So you can say for reproduction as well. The swimmeries in crustaceans. They have how many pairs of antennae? Like insects, crustaceans have antennae. But unlike insects, they have two pairs of antennae. This is one pair, and this is also a second pair. One short pair and one long pair. And remember, antenna, the arthrobots use to detect odor, to smell. It's one pair in insects, while two pairs, a short one and a long one in crustaceans, the aquatic arthropods. Okay, what else? Let's go over more features, more characteristics about invertebrates. Invertebrates undergo a series of changes throughout their life. We call these series of changes metamorphosis. These are actually series of events or changes. Series of changes throughout their life. One called complete metamorphosis, and a second incomplete metamorphosis. It is complete when it has 4 stages. When the young, the larva, doesn't look like the adults. Look at the young here, the larva, and look at the adult here, butterfly. They are completely different. So this is something unique that is only found in organisms undergo complete metamorphosis. You can tell whether this organism is going to undergo complete or incomplete. If the young, the larva, doesn't look like adult at all, we call this organism undergo, yes, complete metamorphosis. And in 4 stages they are. The first is the egg, which hatch into a larva called caterpillar. Then the caterpillar enters a pupa, the 3rd stage. When the pupa opens, it forms or releases or opens into beautiful adult. So 4 stages: egg, larva, pupa, the 3rd stage, and adult, the 4th stage. In the incomplete metamorphosis, as in grasshoppers, you see the young looks like the adult except for the wings. See, look at the young called nymph, not larva, and look at the adult. They look like each other except for the wings. Adults have wings, but young don't have. Like grasshopper, it's only 3 stages: the egg, the nymph, and the adult. That is the difference between the 2 types of metamorphosis. And now, let's go over another feature. As I told you in the very beginning, the invertebrates are actually 2 groups. Invertebrates, if you remember, invertebrates are actually 2 groups. First group, which represents the majority, are non-chordates. Non-chordates represents the majority, from sponges to arthropods. 9 groups. The 10th group is actually called chordates and includes only 2 members, which are tunicates and lancelets. Told you that chordates have 4 features. First is having dorsal tubular nerve cord, which is this, the spinal cord simply. The second is group of cells undergo division to produce later the vertebral column, going to be the vertebral column, the backbone. Yeah, and during our early embryonic stages, we start with notochord. Later, it becomes vertebral column before birth. And also something that is not found in human, but in all animals, the chordate ones, postanal tail, a tail after the anus. This is the anus, and this is the tail after. Like horses, like donkeys, like dogs, lions, all have tails, of course, extended after the anus, postanal tail. And pharyngeal pouch. What is the pharyngeal pouch? Something that is equal to the pharynx we have. Pharynx. The throat. All of these 4 features make the organism vertebrate and make the organism chordate, sorry. And chordates are two groups. Remember, lancelets and tunicates from the invertebrates and all vertebrates. All vertebrates are chordates, but not all invertebrates. Only lancelets. Only lancelet. Organism, animal called lancelet, and a second called tunicate. Only these are chordates, simply because again, they have these four features. I'll clear now and move to another part. What about the excretory structures the invertebrates have? How do they get rid of their wastes? The excretory structures. You know, some of the invertebrates have flame cells. Excretory structure called flame cells. This is the one you see here on the right. This is called flame cells. Also, nephridia, plural, singular nephridium. Malpighian tupules, or no excretory structure at all, but a simple process called diffusion. These are structures, and this is the process. Okay, so I need you to just focus on the development, the change in the excretory structure from invertebrate to the next one, from flame cells to nephridia to Malpighian tupules, and to something later we'll be learning about in the vertebrates called nephrons. Nephrons in kidneys that is only found in vertebrates. Later, we'll be talking about this in vertebrates. But in the invertebrates, it's three structures. Flame cells in some of the invertebrates like flatworms and roundworms, and only flatworms and roundworms. While nephridia are in mollusks. Mollusk, I needed to imagine. I needed to see the picture or the group of mollusks and annelids. I need to see them all. Google them and see how they look like. Mollusks like squid, octopus, snail, clams, oysters, all of these are mollusks. Annelids like what? Annelids like the segmented worm. I think you all know the earthworm or the leeches. These are annelids, segmented worms. And some of the arthrobots, the aquatic ones. The aquatic arthrobots. Which aquatic? Just talk it. The crustaceans. Shrimps, crabs, and lobsters, called crustaceans. They are the sum of arthrobots that have nephridia. What's a nephridium or plural nephridia? Excretory structure, removing waste. Malpighian tupules, as in arthrobots. Majority of arthrobots, like what, teacher? Like insects, all insects. And arachnids. Arachnids like spiders and scorpions. Arachnids, spiders and scorpions. All insects, all arachnids like spiders and scorpions have excretory structure called Malpighian tupules. Just names, all functioning similar way, all to remove waste. And you know what? You can say to maintain homeostasis, and also while removing the waste, they maintain water balance. Maintain, this is the primary function of the excretory structure. Even the kidney in humans, in all vertebrates, all functioning one primary way. Primary in maintaining water balance. Yeah, this comes first. And at the same time, they remove waste. Some other invertebrates don't have excretory structure at all. So they tend to remove the waste through their thin, moist skin, as in some worms. And as in the rest of invertebrates, they undergo this process. Okay, this is diffusion. That is all about the excretory structure, the structure they have to remove wastes. What about the respiratory structure the invertebrates have? See, the respiratory structures They use to in order to get oxygen and to remove carbon dioxide. What do they have? Okay, it's gills. In the aquatic invertebrates, any aquatic organism, okay, have gills like mollusks and crustaceans. These two are aquatic invertebrates with gills. These are how the gills look like, for example, in the crayfish, the crustacean. What about the land ones like insects and arachnids? Insects, for example, have something called tracheal tubules. These are tracheal tubules pass the oxygen from the atmosphere, enter through the spicules. This is an opening on the exoskeleton of insects called spicules, through which the oxygen passed to the tracheal tubules, which take this oxygen to the cells. If there is insect or example of insect, choose tracheal tubules. Tracheal tubules in insects. Insect examples like beetles, like flies, mosquitoes, bees, all of these insects, and all have tracheal tubules for respiration. What about arachnids like spiders, scorpions, and ticks? All have lungs, not lungs, lung-like structures called book lungs. This is how the book lung look like. Remember, these are very common. The part of arthrobots and especially respiratory structures common in Tahseli. So book lungs, as in arachnids, remember, it's tracheal tubules in insects. It's gills in the aquatic ones as crustaceans and mollusks. Again, mollusks like what? Like squid, like octopus, like snails, clams, oysters, and mussels. Okay. Now let's move to another part, which is what? Yeah, we'll learn about the spicules. There is something else they have called the mantles. Told about the spiracles. Spiracles are openings in the exoskeleton, let the oxygen diffuse to the body. Mantle. What's the mantle? You know, when you add the calamari, the squid, the octopus, have eaten them before, you eat actually the flesh, and this flesh is the mantle. Yeah, the part of the squid or the calamari we eat is called the mantle. And this mantle is actually functioning two ways, two methods. The first is protection. The second is respiration. In addition, this mantle functioning in producing the shell for protection and also for respiration. Yeah, diffusion sometimes. Feeding. What do they eat and how do they eat the invertebrates? Okay, here we go. In general, animals are either heterotrophic, and all are heterotrophic. No way. They are not autotrophic. All are heterotrophic. All animals are heterotrophic. All animals, of course, are heterotrophic. What does it mean, teacher? We talked it before. Heterotrophic means other feeder. Other feeder. And what other feeder is means depend on others. Many ways. One of them is being filter feeder. Filter feeder like sponge. Remember how the sponge looks like? This is how the sponge looks like with openings, with pores. Through these pores, the food remains and the water enter. In the cells, the food is captured and the water leaves it through the osculum, the top mouth. Makes the sponge one of the top filter feeders. Also lancelets and tunicates, the only two chordate invertebrates or invertebrate chordates, lancelets and tunicates. So three of the invertebrates, sponges, lancelets, and tunicates are filter feeders. Not only, by the way, also some of the mollusks like clams, oysters, even the seashell, all of these mussels, all of these are filter feeders. They take in the water along with the food, along with the water, capture the food, and get the water out. Sometimes they're grazers, using tongue-like teeth called radula, like the one shown here. See, it is something like scraper they have to scrape the food, as in snails. See here, snails, one of the mollusks, have this radula. The structure is called radula in order to capture food, to scrape food for feeding. This is a second method the animals or the invertebrates feed. Remember, all are heterotrophic, other feeders, consumers, you can say. Another way they feed is, when you come, for example, to the jellyfishes, which belong to cnidarians, you can say they're predators. Predation, yeah. How do they prey? They actually have something called cnidocytes with stinging cells. In jellyfishes, hydra, sea anemones, all of the cnidarians, all of these are cnidarians. Okay, I think maybe one of you got stung before by a jellyfish. See, what you don't see actually is this. When there is a sensor here, a trigger, when stimulated by whatever, it's detached, as you see, and move the poison it has in this tube into the prey and paralyze it. Predators, one of the ways. Some invertebrates are parasitic. Parasitic means require a host, a living host to feed from or to feed on. Parasitic sometimes is external, one way being external, another time is internal. What's the difference? External means live on the outside, on the host, from the host outside. Like what mosquitoes do. Mosquitoes come and bite, and they take our body fluids, take the blood. This means they do external parasitism. But internal parasitism means living inside our cells, like what most of the worms do. All of the roundworms, all of the roundworms, we studied hookworms, filarial worms, pinworm, trichinella worm, and the scarred worm. All of these roundworms we studied are internal parasites. One of the segmented worms called leeches, leeches, these the ones that the one in black and might attach to our skin and keep taking body fluids and our blood, called leeches. Sometimes they use in the microsurgical operation. Tapeworms, two of the tapeworms, flatworms, and also the fluke. These are the only parasitic tapeworms. We'll take more details about them later. Parasitic. So 3 ways, or you can see or 4 ways the invertebrates feed. Different or variety of feeding habits they have. All are heterotrophic at the end. Either they're filter feeders, or they are parasitic, or they're predators, or use something called radula to scrape food. It's clear, and move to another part. Here we go. Okay, more about feeding. Teacher, what about them? What about them in the insects? I think you'll have seen these mouth parts. Insects' mouth parts, or the insects' mandibles. Sometimes they call it mandibles. These mandibles, or these mouth parts, mouthpieces, are different in insects. This one for chewing, as in grasshopper. Yeah, eat plants they are, chew plants. Chew the dry plant parts, as in grasshopper. Grasshopper. You might see this figure or this mouth part in a grasshopper in a picture shown in the quiz or the exam, and ask you what kind of food or what's the feeding method it does. It's chewing. But if piercing and sucking, as in mosquitoes, the one you see here, see? It cuts and starts sucking body fluids. Siphoning, as in bees, used in order to drink, to take in nectar. While in flies, house flies, they do something called sponging, as in house flies. This one, this mouth part, mandibles. Mandibles, D-I-B-L-E-S, mandibles, the mouth parts. What about circulation? Another feature, another characteristics the invertebrates have, called circulatory system. Circulatory system. When you come to circulatory system, you need to put in mind two parts. The first is whether the circulatory system is open or closed. How about the heart? Also, you need to talk about the heart. And this means whether the heart is one chamber, two chambers, three chambers, or four chambers. Actually, this point is not clarified, not mentioned, you can say at all in the invertebrates. But when we go to the vertebrates, yeah, we need to put it in mind. For now, not only it's open or closed. What's the difference and what difference this makes and what it means? Open circulatory system means the blood is pumped from the heart. Do they have heart, teacher? Heart, one heart or more. From the heart, the blood is pumped to the tissues. It means, teacher, no vessels to carry the blood from the heart to the body parts? Yes. And hence they're called open circulatory system. The blood is not confined in vessels. The blood does not run in vessels. Just go directly from the heart to the tissues, like in most of invertebrates. And some of them, like arthrobots, like some of the mollusks, octopus and squids, only these. In addition, also you can say some of the annelids as well. Annelids, most of the annelids, not all, most of the annelids, like earthworm, they have what? They have a closed circulatory system. Even all vertebrates, including humans, have closed circulatory system. Means the blood runs from the heart in vessels to the body part, come to the heart and back to the heart, to the lung, all in vessels. Having vessels make the circulatory system better and supply more oxygen, remove the waste in a higher rate. These organisms with closed circulatory system can move efficiently and do better tasks and become better adapted to the life. That is the difference between the two types of circulatory system. Either the blood runs from heart to tissues directly, where not in vessels, or in vessels from the heart to the body part and back from the body to the heart. In vessels. This is the secret. What else? One of the invertebrate groups called echinoderms. Echinoderms have radial symmetry. Radial as adults. When adults have radial symmetry like jellyfishes, but they have bilateral symmetry when they're youngs, when they're larvae. Wow. All either have bilateral symmetry or radial symmetry, but echinoderms, radial when adults, bilateral when larvae. Sea stars, sea lilies, brittle stars, sea urchins, sea sand dollars, sea cucumber, and many more. They're marine, living in salt water. Marine means living in salt water, in oceans and seas. They have something, they don't have vessels. They have endoskeleton, remember. They have something called water vascular system, vessels through which the water is pumped. Water vascular system, giving them support. What else? More about echinoderms. The very common point about echinoderms that they have something called tube feet, multifunctioning structure called tube feet. That is a multifunctioning organ. Multifunction organ. everything you can say, movement, feeding, excretion, respiration, all performed by 2 feet. They have a spiny skin for protection, but what give actually real protection is the endoskeleton they have. Like vertebrates, they have endoskeleton. And you know what? They're the only invertebrates, the only invertebrate with endoskeleton. Only. And the only invertebrate with exoskeleton is arthrobots groups. The rest either no skeleton or have hydrostatic skeleton. What else? We have chewing devices. As I told you, they have radial symmetry, bilateral symmetry. We have mouth structure called Aristotle lantern. This is what's called by chewing devices. We have chewing devices called Aristotle lantern, as in sea urchin. Also, they call them the Echinoderm. They call them biterbators. Biterbators means when they stir up sediments of the sea floor. Yeah, just like you move the sediments from the sea floor so they can see the food remains along with other invertebrates. This help other organisms, other marine organisms a lot. See, these are a couple of figures for you to visualize them. This is a sea urchin with the water vascular system. This is the water vascular system. These are the 2 feet. The endoskeleton they have, the spines, all of them. All of what mentioned above. What else? This is one of the cnidarians called Hydra. It has tentacles with the stinging cells here, which produce toxin in order to paralyze the prey, then move it through the mouth, the top mouth. They call this opening, by the way, they call it mouth. It's functioning two, mouth and anus at the same time, through which the food enter and the waste leave. There is something called gastrovascular cavity, like a stomach. They move the food here where digestion happens. What else? Another group of them is the invertebrate caudate, which is called tunicate. This is how the tunicates looks like. It's a filter feeder. Yeah, takes in the food along with the water through this direction, and let the water go out and trap the food here. It has something called siphon. And you know what? Only 3 have siphon. Siphon as in squids, only squids. Also the octopus. Octopus. Also here this tunicate. Only these 3 have siphons. Why? In order to eject the water, they eject the water and escape. So they can escape ejecting the water and go the opposite direction. They're filter feeders, and the only filter feeders we studied are the sponges, now the tunicates, and before the lancelets, also clams, oysters. All of these are filter feeders, means taking the water along with the food, capture the food, and let the water out. Okay, just a couple of things left before we end. Here, these are a couple of drawings come before in Tahseli. This is sea star, one of the echinoderms. It has eye spots here on the undersides of the foot to detect light. Hey, here is the question, the first common question about it. What happens if one arm is cut? If removed from this way, one arm, what might happen? It regenerates. Remember this word. If one arm is cut, it's regenerated, regrown. What else? This figure you see here, is an earthworm. Earthworm belong to annelids, the segmented worms. Segmentation beneficial. If one segment is damaged, other segments can carry out its function. It's hermaphrodite, means can produce both sperm and egg cells. It has something like birds. Yeah, earthworms like birds. In what? Like birds, having crop to store the food. Having crop to store. Here where the food is stored. Crop. just like birds, and have something called gizzard, also where food is digested by using stones. Yeah, they swallow stones like birds, help them to digest the tough food in the base of the stomach, which is called gizzard. Also, they have something called clitellum. Here in the clitellum, actually, where it's a swelling somewhere, it is not shown, swelling just similar to this, the clitellum, okay? The clitellum is actually where fertilization takes place. Clitellum for fertilization or reproduction. 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 Clitellum for reproduction. You know, they're farmers' friends because simply they aerate the soil. Yeah, as they go in the soil, they make hollows, they make tubes through which the oxygen can go deeper into the soil. Also, the water, along with the water, can reach deeper in the soil. So they're farmers' friends because they help their crops to increase the yield and grow more healthier. Yeah, these are a couple of figures shown above. We've talked about them already. Here, actually, the last thing is two of the insects relative, millipedes and centipedes. These are insects, not insects, they're insects relatives. What? Aren't they worms? No, they're not worms. Simply because they have jointed legs. No worms having jointed legs. Okay? These millipedes have actually two pairs of walking legs in each segment. See, many of them are there. Millipedes, like 1,000 legs it has. Herbivores, not poisonous, move slowly. Unlike the centipedes, which have one pair in each segment, they're carnivores, poisonous, and they move very quickly. Both are Arthrobots members. They have jointed legs and exoskeleton, more closer to the insects they are. And also, this is a picture of two parasitic flatworms. The fluke, the one that might attack the liver and cause hepatic failure. It's called also schistosoma or bilharzia. Belong to what? Belong to flatworms. And they're parasitic, internal parasitic they are. Internal means they live inside the host. And what is the host of these parasitic flatworms? Us, we, humans. See, this is also called tapeworm. It's actually 10-meter long. Wow. Lives in the small intestine and later moves to live in the muscles. Tapeworms. That's it all. And by the way, there is a summary I put after here to summarize you something about the diseases, the parasitic worms of flatworms and roundworms, and the carriers, the host, and how are they transmitted. This table is very important. Please go over. You'll find in last page of the booklet. And also, there is a summary I made here. Clear? Yeah, there is another summary here. Summarize you all main points regarding the invertebrates. Although the previous pages, about 19 pages, we explained you the invertebrates. This table summarizes you the main points that make the invertebrates different and similar. See, regarding this here, the phylum, sorry, it's 1L, phylum, the 10 phyla here, what excretory structure, the circulatory system open or closed, the respiratory structures, the skeleton, whether it's whether they have a skeleton or they don't have or they have. If they have, what kind? Hydrostatic skeleton or endoskeleton or exoskeleton. And about the feeding habit and digestion, whether they are filter feeders, they're scrapers, grazers, they're parasitic, or they sting their prey, and many other ways. Actually, I'd like to say thank you for watching, and hope you learned something. Regarding the question, we'll take them in another session, inshallah. That's it all for this session, and see you inshallah next time. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.